Hey guys, in this video we're going to be building a GitHub profile search application. Now I have a video that I made a few months ago where we built this app using Angular 2 release candidate 4. Well, since then RC6 has been released, so that code may no longer work if you follow along and you use the quick start and so on, because the quick start now uses RC6. So I figured I'd make another video with that application, but I'm going to go through it a little quicker than I did the first time. Alright, but I'll still try and explain what I'm doing as we go along. Alright, so this is a good opportunity for you to really see what's different about RC6. Okay, unfortunately, when we're still in the release candidate stage of an application, things can change really rapidly and really severely. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and first of all register a GitHub application. So if you log into GitHub and go to /settings/developers, you should be able to register a new application. Now the reason I'm doing this is because if you don't do this and you don't get an API key, you'll only get a certain amount of requests from your application. And a few times using this API I've actually run out and I've had to do this. So really simple, we're just going to put in an application name. Let's say GitHub search. For the home page, we're going to just use localhost port 3000. We're also going to use that here. For the description, I'm just going to say simple search app. Okay, so we'll register, and now we have our application registered. We have a client ID and a client secret. All right, so we're just going to keep that page open for now. All right, now we're going to be using the quick start. So if you go to github.com/angular/quickstart, there is a command down here to clone it. I'm just going to grab that. All right, and then we're going to open up a command line. I'm using Windows, but of course you can use Linux or Mac, whatever it is that you like. All right, so we're going to go to CD. I'm going to go to a projects folder called projects, but you can build it wherever you'd like. And we're going to go ahead and paste that in, and I'm going to delete that my proj, and we're going to call this GitHub search. Okay, and that's going to go ahead and clone it into that directory. Now we'll go cd GitHub search, and we're going to run npm install. Okay, that's going to go ahead and install all the dependencies. Now I'm going to open that folder in my editor. I'm using Visual Studio Code, which is free if you want to check that out. And let's see, GitHub search. Alright, now if we go and we look at the package.json file here, you can see that our Angular version is RC6. Alright, and if you're watching this in the future, when they update this, I will try and redo it again so that it's kept up. Now I'm going to change the name right here. We're just going to change it to GitHub search and save it, and that's pretty much all we have to do in this file, so we're going to close it up. Now let's go ahead and run this. So we're going to say npm start, and that should start our application. Alright, let's open up the console with F12, and we have no errors, which is good. Alright, now we're going to kind of go over what's changed here. So you'll notice that we do have the app component TS, and the TS files are all we're paying attention to here, because the JavaScripts, those are just the compiled files. Alright, so we want the TypeScript files. And if we look at this component.ts file, there's no difference from RC4 from the previous application we built. What is different is this app module.ts, and this is basically where we're going to import all of our components. Okay, so if you have inner components, instead of bringing them into the main app component, you bring them into here and then just add them in the declarations array. Okay, this is also where we define our bootstrap, which is the main app component. Alright, and then any modules we use, such as the HTTP module, you want to bring in and then import here. Okay, So what we're going to do now is in the app folder, we're going to create a folder called components. And inside there, we're only going to create one component, which is going to be the GitHub component. So we'll create a new file here, call it github.component.ts. All right, and then we're just going to copy what we have in the app component ts and bring that over. And we're going to change the selector. We'll just change that to GitHub. And then we need to change the name of the class to GitHub component. All right, and for now, let's put a constructor in here. And the constructor will automatically run when the component's rendered. So I just want to do a console.log. And we'll just say GitHub component init. Okay, so we'll save that. Now if I reload now, we're not going to see anything because we need to bring it over to our app.module. Actually, you know what I'm going to do first is change this template. We're just going to say GitHub component. Okay, and then we'll go over to app.module.ts and we're going to bring that in here. Okay, it's going to come from /component/github.component. Okay, now we need to add that into this array right here, like that. Okay, we'll save that. And now we're going to go to app component ts, and you see where we have the template here. Let's go ahead and just add in here GitHub, an opening tag and a closing tag. And we'll save that. And then you can see that that's showing up, and we also see the init message in the console. All right, so it's as easy as that to create a component and then import it to the module file and then just add the tag here, or the directive rather. Now instead of including the template as a string like this in both this file and in our GitHub file, we want to use a separate HTML file. So in the root folder here, or the app folder rather, we're going to create a new file called app.component.html, and we're going to grab from the TS file this template. Okay, we'll just copy that, and then we're going to change template to template URL, and then we can specify a location, which is going to be app.component.html. Now in order to use relative paths like this, just to have the file name and not have to do some long path, we have to provide up here module ID and then set it to module.id. Okay, so we'll save that, and then let's go into the HTML. We'll paste that in and save, and then we should just get what we just had. Okay, and I'll just change this just to make sure. We'll just say welcome. Okay, so we know that now that's coming from that HTML file. Now we want to do the same thing with our GitHub component. So inside of the components folder, let's create a file called github.component.html. And then same thing, we're going to go into the GitHub TS file and change this to template URL. Change that to github.component.html, and then we're going to add the module ID up here and save. And then in the GitHub component, let's just say GitHub. Okay, so now we know that those components now have their own HTML files. So now what we want to do is create a service. Okay, so we're going to create in the app folder alongside of the components folder, we'll create a folder called services. Okay, and then inside there we'll have a file called github.service.ts. Now this file is going to be virtually the exact same as it was in the RC4 version. Okay, so we're going to import the injectable package so that we can inject this service as a dependency, and that's going to be from Angular/core. Okay, now we're also going to be using the HTTP module, but we're going to import that. Actually, you know what? We'll import it here too. I'm not exactly sure if we need to do it here as well as app.module, but it's not going to hurt. So we're going to import HTTP and headers, and that's going to be from at Angular/HTTP. Okay, we're also going to be using reactive extensions because what we want to do is return an observable using the HTTP module. All right, and we want to use the map operator, and that's part of reactive extensions, or RxJS. So we're going to say import RxJS/add/operator/map. Okay, now we're going to add the injectable decorator like that, and then we can create our class. So we're going to say export class, call it GitHub service. Okay, now we're going to have a couple properties here. One is going to be the username. Okay, so this is going to be the default username. I'm going to just set it to my GitHub name, if I can remember how to spell my own name. And then we're going to have the client ID and the client secret. So client underscore ID, client secret. Okay, and we're just going to grab those from the application registration that we did. So this will be the ID and the secret. Alright, so now we're going to have our constructor. And in the constructor, we need to inject the HTTP module. So we're going to say private, and I'm going to just call this underscore HTTP and set that to HTTP, which is coming from up here from the module. All right, and then let's just do a console log, and we'll just say GitHub service init. Alright, and let's just keep it at that for now. So we'll save it, and then we're going to go into git component.ts, and let's go up to the top here, and we're going to import that service. So GitHub service from, it's going to be /services/github.service. And then we're going to add it down here as a provider. So we need to say providers, which is an array, and then we'll just add that GitHub, not component, service. Alright, and then we need to just inject it into our constructor. So we'll say private underscore GitHub service, set that to GitHub service. Alright, so now we should be able to use that. Let's save it and go to our application, and then down here you can see we get GitHub service init. So we know that that's connected to our application into that component. So what we want to do now is we want to be able to fetch a user's profile information through our service. So let's go back to GitHub service TS, and down here we're going to create a function called getUser, and we're going to set an observable in here, and we'll do that using the HTTP module. So we'll say this dot underscore HTTP dot get, because it's going to be a get request. All right, and then here we need to put the URL. So if I open another tab and I go to HTTP api.github.com/users/ and then a username, it'll give us all this information. Okay, it gives us the login, which is the username, the ID, the avatar URL, so we can use the image, different URLs for the profile, the blog URL, the number of repositories, the number of followers, all this stuff. So we definitely want this URL here. Okay, we'll paste that in, except we obviously don't want it to always go to mine, so we're gonna get rid of that and then concatenate on this dot username, which is gonna come from here. Okay, and that'll be dynamic. All right, now since it's an observable, we're going to use that map operator. So say dot map, and then in here we want to pass in a response and set that to res.json. Okay, we're returning JSON content. Save that, and then we need to go on the other side on the component and basically respond to that observer, or subscribe to that observer. So to do that, let's go into the constructor and we'll say this dot underscore GitHub service dot get user. Okay, now since it's a observer, we're going to call dot subscribe. Okay, we want to get the users, and we'll set that to a code block, and then let's do console.log users. Alright, so why is that? Let's see, what did I do here? Oh, you know what? It's because we didn't return it. Put return there, save it, and then that error should go away. So let's go ahead and go back to our application and reload. And now you can see down here we're console logging an object which has all that data that I just showed you. Alright, so we can now use this in our application. So instead of just console logging it, what we're going to do is set it to a property. So we're going to add right above the constructor property called user, and we're going to set the type to any. And then down here we'll say, comment that out, we'll say this dot user equals wait a minute, this dot user equals, this right here should actually be user. That makes more sense, and we'll go like that. So now since we're setting the user property to that response, we can use that inside of our template. Alright, so if we were to go into GitHub component HTML and put in an h1, and in here double curly brace, user dot login, is it login? Or maybe it's, oh, you know what? Yeah, you know what? We have to actually check for user first so that it doesn't render before it's actually responded to. So we're going to put div, and we're going to say ng if equals user. So we're checking for user, and then we'll put the h1 in, and there we go. Alright, so now it's getting us the user login. So now that we know that we can get user information, we're going to start to work on the user interface. So we're going to use Bootstrap. I'm going to go to my index.html, and we're just going to use the CDN. So let's grab that, bootstrap cdn.com, and we'll grab this link right here, and let's go here and say link style sheet paste that in, save it, and then we're going to go to our app component HTML file, and we want to get a navbar. So let's go to getbootstrap.com. We'll go to examples, where is it? Getting started, and then examples, and this starter template right here. I'm going to click on that, do a Control U, and let's grab this nav tag. Okay, we'll grab the container too, and let's put that in there. Okay, change a couple things here. We're going to get rid of the navbar fixed top, and let's change this navbar inverse to navbar default. Project name, we'll change that to GitHub search. Okay, we're not going to need any of these menu links, so we'll get rid of those. And let's see, container, we'll get rid of this starter template div, and in here we're going to put class with row. Okay, so we're using the grid system, Bootstrap grid system, so we're going to put a class here. And this will be the column class. So we want it to be 8 columns wide, so call MD 8. But I also want to offset it too, so call MD offset 2. And then in here we just want our GitHub component. Save that. Let's take a look. Okay, so it looks a little weird because we still have our style CSS that came with Angular. If you click down here on that, we're going to just select everything and get rid of it. Okay, save that, and now it looks much better. So let's go to, now we'll go to our GitHub component.html file. And I want this to be a panel, a Bootstrap panel. So let's go back to getbootstrap.com, and we'll go up to components and then panels. And I'm going to grab this right here, the panel with a heading. Okay, we'll go and we'll paste that right in here. Space it out a little. Okay, so in the panel title, we're going to put the user's name or login. Actually, wait, no, we'll do the name because the name is the actual full name. So we'll do that. And then in the body, what we're going to do is we're going to have 2 columns. One will be the avatar, and then one will have some information. So let's say div class equals row. Okay, so in this row we're going to have two divs. One is going to be 4 columns wide, so call MD4. That'll be where the avatar goes, and then we'll have an 8 column. Alright. So let's see, in 4 column, this is going to be pretty easy. We're just going to put an image tag, and the source is going to be user.avatar_URL. And let's see, we're going to give this a class. I'll give it a class of img thumbnail, and also GitHub-avatar. Okay, so if I go ahead and save that, and you can see that we have the image. Alright, so that on this side, the 8 column div, we're going to have some information. What I want to do is use labels that will have the number of repositories, number of gists, and so on. So if we go to Get Bootstrap and then labels, we're going to go ahead and just grab some of these. Paste those in. Okay, and this first one will be repos. So we can get that with user.public_repos. And then we're just going to put the text public repos. Okay, this one here will be gists. Oh, we need our braces. So user.public gists. This one will be followers. And this one will be following. Okay, let's take a look at that. And there we go. So that looks pretty good. Now under that last span there, we're going to have let's see, should I put, you know what, I'm going to wrap these in their own div. So this will be stats. Alright, and then under that we'll have a line break and then a UL, and we're going to give this a class of list group. Which is a bootstrap class. And then let's do li class list group item. And in here, let's put a strong tag. We'll say username. And then here we can put in user.login. Okay, let's copy that list item. Okay, so after username, let's do location. We can get that with user.location. And then we'll do email. Okay, we'll do blog. And let's do one more under that. This one's going to be member since. And we can get that with user.created_at. Alright, let's save that, reload, and now we get all that information. So, in addition to profile info, we want to get the repos. Okay, now for that, we're going to create another service function. So let's go to our service, and let's go ahead and copy this. And then we'll change this to get repos. And then we just need to slightly change the URL. We're going to add on to the end here, concatenate/repos. Okay, now back in the component, we're going to grab this, paste that in, change this to get repos, change this to repos, and then this. Okay, and we have to add repos as a property up here. Like that. So now we have access to the actual repos. So back in the template, the GitHub component.html, we're going to put in another panel under this one, which ends right here. I'll grab that. Okay, so for this one, let's change the title to repos. And then down here, again, we're going to have a row. And then this is going to be just one 12-column div. So we'll say div class call md12. Alright, now what we need to do, those repos that we get, it's an array, so we need to loop through those. So we're going to use ng4 for that. So div ng4, set that to repos. Actually, no, we want to set that to let repo of repos. So then for each instance, we should have access to that repo variable. All right, so we're going to put in, actually, you know what we're going to do is we're going to have two columns in here. So let's create another row. Okay, so this one's going to be a 9-column div. And then next to it will be a 3-column div. Alright, so in the 9-column div, we're going to have an h4. And that'll have the repo name. Alright, let's just test that out so far. Okay, so you can see it's getting all the names. Now we want that to be wrapped in a link so we can actually link to the page. So inside the h4 we'll put an a tag. And let's make this open in another window. Okay, and then we can get that link by saying repo.html_URL. Alright, so if we test that out, click on one of these, it opens a new tab and brings us to that repo. Alright, so I also want to have the description underneath. So underneath that h4, we'll put a paragraph. And we'll say repo.description. Okay, so now in this 3-column, I want to have the number of watchers and the number of forks, and we're going to put those inside labels. Okay, so I'm just going to copy 2 of these labels up here, paste those in. Okay, so we're going to change this to repo.watchers. And then this one here, repo.forks. Okay, save that. And there we go. Now I'll make this look a little better with CSS. But yeah, that's good for now. Let's put an HR. We'll put a horizontal rule underneath each one. So that's going to go under the row. So right here. Alright, so that looks pretty good. So as far as our profile and repos, that's pretty much done. So the next stage is to have a search box where we can actually change the user. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go all the way to the top, and that's where we're going to put our input. So we're going to put a row here. And let's make this just a 12-column div that goes all the way across. Okay, so we're going to put in a form. And that's going to have a div with the class of form group. You can see most of this code I'm typing is just bootstrap markup. Alright, so input, which is going to have a type of text. Okay, we're going to give it a class of form control. Give it a placeholder. And for the placeholder, we'll just say GitHub username. And then we're going to use what's called ng model. Okay, and that's used for data binding. So that's going to go in a set of brackets and parentheses, since it's two-way. And say ng model. And then we'll set that to a property called username. All right, now we want a function to run when we press the enter key. All right, so what we're going to do here is set a pair of parentheses. That's how you can define an event or an event handler. So it's going to be keyup.enter, and we'll set that equal to a function called search. Alright, so now we'll save that, and let's go back to the component. Now if we look down here, we're getting an error, an input error. The reason for that is with RC6 we actually have to define the forms module. So we're going to go into app.module.ts, and let's go up here and say import forms module, and that's going to be from Angular/forms, and then we just need to include that here. So now if I save that, okay, that should clear up that error. And now we're just getting one because we need to set a name attribute that's equal to the same value as ng model. So let's go back to our component HTML, and we set an ng model to username, so we're also going to set name equal to username. Alright, there we go. Now if I type something and press enter, we're going to get an error because we haven't created that search function yet. So let's go back to our component TS file, and let's go right here and say search. Actually, no, not right here. We need to go outside of the constructor. Okay, now remember we had an ng model equal to username, so we need to add that as a property. So that's going to be a string. And then if I go down here and say console.log this.username, when we submit it, it should console log whatever we put in here. Okay, so if I click enter, you'll see that it catches it. Now, if you want, we can also set this, instead of just enter, we can set it to just key up, and that'll just constantly search as you type. So as I type, you can see down here, it's just running that search function. So we'll keep it like that, just to make it kind of more dynamic, I guess. All right, now what we want to do is in our component, we're going to move this stuff. We're going to cut that out. And we're going to paste that in here in the search. Okay. So that way, when we enter the application, there shouldn't be anything there besides the search. Alright, now once I start typing, it's searching, but it's still getting just Brad. So what we need to do is create another service function to update the username. Alright, so let's go back to our search. Our service, and we'll say update username. Okay, that'll get passed in a username. And we'll set that to string. And then in here, all we need to do is say this dot username is equal to username. Save that. And then back in the component, we're going to go at the top of the search function, and we'll say this dot underscore GitHub service dot update username, and then we'll pass in this dot username. Okay, so now I'll save, and then as I start to type, you'll see that it changes as we go along. Okay, when I get to my name, that's what pops up. Alright, so that's it. It's very dynamic. Even as I delete, you'll see that it changes. Alright, so hopefully you enjoyed this, and you can see that there's not too much difference between RC4 and RC6. You do have the the app.module TS file, an ng module, and the routing is also a little different. I might do another video getting into that. So I would suggest checking out the 12 project Angular 2 course. Right now the projects are in RC4, but they will be updated accordingly. And that's it. Alright, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.